Yeah. Welcome back to another episode of Drafts with Jordan and Josh. I am one of your hosts, Mr. Jordan Walker. With me, as per usual, the scintillating Mr. Josh Liskowitz. How are you doing there, buddy?
I'm doing awesome. How are you, Jordan?
You know, I'm doing really good. You know, we only have a couple weeks left in the regular season now, but I mean, we're really wrapping up this, Rookie of the Year race now, Josh. You only have like 3 weeks left basically to impress upon you, myself, and the talented Billy Moy. So, Josh, let's just start it off like right off the bat, man. Let's just go to these rookies, right? Let's go to these rookie rankings on the talented Billy Moy's list on ProFootballFocus.com.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Woo! All right, so starting off, Josh, number one, still holding strong. We have Alvin Kamara he's got the grade of 90.0, and he just really, I don't know if he had he kind of get hurt and miss like the portion of this game, but he still was effective when he went
early on. He went into concussion protocol and didn't come back. Yeah.
But still, I mean, his stats are still very, very impressive, which, again, why he's leading this list.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Second in the league with 4.26 yards after contact per attempt. Most of the league probably isn't averaging 4 yards per carry. He's averaging 4.26 yards after initial contact, which is absurd.
So, yeah, we'll see if he keeps it up. You know, like we had this discussion, it's almost like, Kareem Hunt was the Rookie of the Month for September, and then Deshaun Watson was a Rookie of the Month somewhere, and Kamara's been a Rookie of the Month. So we'll see what happens in December. Now, with the weather's turning, my goodness. Yeah, so speaking of weather, there's Tre'Davious White, the corner for the Buffalo Bills, is number 2 in our list here. PFF grade of 90.1. Again, he's had a stellar year, but you saw that snow game, Josh. That game was crazy this past week.
I did. It was awesome. And I not to get on a tangent, but we do fantasy here at PFF, and I was quite pleased that my memory of a certain running back from Buffalo served me well tearing through Detroit a couple years ago. So I made sure I went after him on this Sunday, and
that's funny.
Lo and behold, LaShawn McCoy tore it up again. He loves that snow.
That's so funny that you said that, because I remember I was just I was working and I saw that the game was on the screen, and I was remembering. It's like, man, I could swear I remember that Sean McCoy is really good in snow. Like, just kind of saying that to myself, I'm like, I knew I said that somewhere. So then I looked, and I had mentioned it a couple of years earlier, totally, and specifically that Lions game, about how he is a mutter, and he just seems to be able to move at full speed when everybody else is running through snow. He's not. It's just so weird.
That was a critical game for the Lions. Then they probably lost a bye as a result of that game, because they probably would have had a bye, then they wouldn't have had the crazy debacle of a first-round playoff game in Dallas with the multiple uber controversial ref calls. Anyway, we're getting way off on a tangent here.
Oh, we are. Seriously. Okay. So number 3 on our list here, Josh, is Marshawn Lattimore, the corner for the Saints, PFF grade of 90.2. Again, I mean, that's elite. He's playing at an elite level, Josh, as a rookie.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see what he and the rest of the Saints defense does down the stretch. Obviously, Philly, they're going to have some issues now without their quarterback, who is probably going to be league MVP. That opens the door for teams like New Orleans, that has all these ridiculous rookies, Marshawn Lattimore being the top one, to kind of take the reins. But they've got that brutal division, and they're going to have a couple of those games down the stretch. So I'm excited to see how he does against these divisional opponents down the stretch, see how New Orleans finishes out, see if they can make a real push in the playoffs.
All right, so number 4, we have a new entry, Josh. New entry at number 4 on Billy's list here. Reuben Foster, linebacker from the San Francisco 49ers. Captain Splatter, as my man Kyle Brandt likes to call him. PFF grade at 89.0. Just been, really super impressive, when you get a chance to see him, Josh. Just the way that he just sort of explodes into people.
Yes, he does. Here's an awesome stat of ours for him. The average linebacker has a positive grade on 10.5% of their run snaps.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Reuben Foster leads the league at 21.7.
It's like twice as good as that.
Yeah, more than 1 out of every 5 run defense snaps. He's getting a positive grade from us. And he's the only one which isn't surprising, he's the only one to be double that league average of 10.5. So that that tells you how insanely good he has been. And, it's one of those things where maybe there'll be issues with him long term. Who knows? But there's some teams that passed over him or took other linebackers in front of him that, at least in the short term, they're probably kicking themselves right now because Reuben Foster is, as we expected, just absolutely tearing it up.
You're right, and that's right now it's looking like a really good pick for the first-year GM John Lynch there, a little feather in his cap. Especially since when we went over that, we learned that he's basically the impetus behind the defensive picks. So he must have really liked Reuben's game. Don't blame him, and that's really paying off for him right now.
Yep.
Number 5 on this list is Kareem Hunt, running back for the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, familiar name's been there since week 1, basically, on this list. PFF grade of 87.4. I know it's not September, Josh, but this guy's, is still getting it done, even now into December.
Yeah, they finally went back to him, gave him a heavy dosage this past week, and it wasn't just because of game script. He had 9 carries in the first quarter. So they made a conscious effort to get the ball to Kareem Hunt, and it paid off for them. And now they have that huge game against who are they playing this week? San Diego. No, they're definitely not playing San Diego, but they might be playing LA instead on Saturday night. So I'll be interested to see if they do more of the same. If considering the pass rush and the secondary play, hint at the next person we're going to talk about. If Kansas City decides, we want to give the ball to Kareem Hunt, we want to keep the ball on the ground and see if he gets another heavy workload.
All right, so just rounding out the rest of the Talented Illinois list, which you can see on ProFootballFocus.com. Again, as you mentioned, we had number 6, Desmond King, the corner from the Chargers of Los Angeles.
Yes.
Number 7 is Myles Garrett, the edge from the Browns. Number 8, John Johnson, the safety from the Rams. John Johnson the third. Number 9, Ryan Ramczyk, the tackle for the Saints, again with that part of that ridiculous Saints draft class. And then number 10, Dalvin Tomlinson, the defensive tackle for the New York Giants. So again, just go ahead and check out that list on ProFootballFocus.com. So at first, like when you told me, we were discussing what we were going to talk about on the show, and you said, let's talk about the prospects of the bowl games, I thought you were lying to me. I was like, there's not already bowl games, Josh. There's not seriously already bowl games. Is there seriously already bowl games, or did you make this up?
There are seriously bowl games. There are 5 of them on Saturday.
Are you serious? Wow.
5.
Okay. 5. Okay.
5.
Well, since none of the sponsors are
you
paying
should have gotten
us,
your Christmas shopping done ahead of time, Plucker.
Since none of their sponsors are paying us, we don't really need to name their names, right? So is there a Battle Frog? Is there a Battle Frog Bowl? So anyways, so we have Boise State is playing Oregon. That'll be a fun one. I know that you're going to be doing the analysis on that one. There's some talented players I know on that Boise State defense and on the Oregon offense. But we got to start, Josh. With probably with Tyrell Crosby, right? I think he's probably be the best prospect in that game.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that. 3 total pressures, no sacks or hits allowed. Number 1 tackle prospect in terms of pass blocking efficiency this year. There's a lot of good tackle prospects, and we've talked about him a little bit. He's, at least production-wise, he's put himself in that category. So
he never gets that mentioned, though. It's so weird.
Yeah,
you never see him mentioned with the top guys.
And it's also worth mentioning, I think in general, as we do this, let's go team by team. But for this case, I think it's worth mentioning he's probably going to see a good bit of Boise State edge Jabril Frazier. Frazier has 8 sacks, 8 hits, number 10 draft eligible, 34 outside backer in terms of pass rush productivity. So That's going to be a fun matchup to watch when those two go head to head.
And Frazier, Frazier has legit, NFL edge rusher size too. That length. I believe he's like 6'4" with like long arms. So So that'll be a nice test for Crosby. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yep. Yeah, he's also outstanding against the run. One missed tackle this year.
Wow.
Which is pretty remarkable. That makes him number 4 in terms of tackling efficiency among 34 outside backers with at least 400 total snaps. So Frazier's going to be a guy that I'm going to guess much of the country doesn't know much about, but he's going to be picking up steam, and certainly he could do a lot to help his case against Tyrell Crosby. So that's definitely one to watch.
So going back to the run game in this game, I see on this list that you sent me, you have Royce Freeman, the running back for the Oregon Ducks.
Never heard of him.
He's been in college for 20 years.
Yes, he got in the same time Frank Gore got into Miami, but he's still really productive. 50 missed tackles on rushes this year. Number 5 senior in terms of elusive rating. That's among guys that had at least 150 total touches. So he had kind of an off year last year. I think he's right back on it this year, and he's also going to have an interesting matchup. Because Boise has another linebacker, inside linebacker, Leighton Vander Esch, 46 run stops, number 2 inside linebacker prospect this year in terms of run stop percentage. So we're going to have another head-to-head battle there as well.
He can also long snap.
Yes,
yeah.
That's so I guess that's a good thing.
The more you can do,
long snapper, right? I don't think that's going to be a primary focus of teams, but hey, it'll help once he's on a team, I guess.
I remember when Connor Barwin came out, it was like he could play tight end, he could play edge rusher, and then he had also been a long snapper. So I always thought that was funny. Yeah. I always threw that into his evaluation. People always looked at me like it was crazy. I was like, hey, the more you can do. So one of the other Ducks has really stood out for us in our grading system this year, Josh, has been the corner Arrion Springs. I believe he made our all Pac-12 first team, and he's been basically the best corner, at least by our grading system, all year in the Pac-12. And it's just really impressive. And again, another guy you don't really get to hear too much about.
Yeah, and again, you look at what he is in terms of height, weight, 6 foot, 205 in that range. That's going to interest NFL teams. So you put that together with his production, and he's definitely going to be yet another name that you're going to be hearing a lot more of than you heard during the year. He was thrown at 55 times, gave up just 23 receptions, had 14 passes defended this year, and gave up a reception once just every 16.9 coverage snaps, which is second best among seniors in that conference. So and very good player there.
Yeah, he's got, he might be facing off against a pretty talented wide receiver, too, from Boise State in this game.
Yeah. It's funny how this game matches up because it has all these matchups, and that really wasn't my intent when I did this. I just wanted to take the best prospects from each side, or in many cases, the only prospect, and they all seem to be matchups. But Cedric Wilson from Boise State, he was on our radar last year because he had big grades last year. It was 87.2 receiving grade. That's number 7 among all draft-eligible wide receivers this year. And he ended the year with a string of just huge gains. He had gains of at least 39 yards in each of the last 5 games. So that's going to be an interesting point to watch with him against Springs. And again, I like that matchup a lot because of Springs' size. Let's see how that matches up against Cedric Wilson, who's comparable in that aspect.
Now, I know there are a bunch more talented players in the Oregon front 7, including some who are going to be really high on our list for the draft for this after this one. I know Jalen Jelks and Troy Fumagali. Yeah, those guys will be some really top prospects for the 2019 draft. But there's still another front 7 guy for the 2018 draft there, Josh, and that's the edge rusher Justin Hollins.
Yeah, he's kind of worked in spurts this year. 8 pressures against Utah, 3 sacks, and 4 total pressures against Cal. But he's the number 10 senior 34 outside backer in terms of run stop percentage. So really strong player against the run as well. So I'll be interested to see how he does. And again, I know you know a lot more about him, but certainly he's a guy that's been on our radar, and he's going to be on the NFLs as well.
All right, let's move on to another game. We have Western Kentucky is playing Georgia State. Again, not a ton of prospects on both sides of the ball in this game, or both teams, I should say. In recent years, there's been a bunch of good prospects that have come out of Western Kentucky. It seems like we have like a couple guys every season. This year, the premier guy and a guy that we will see at the Senior Bowl will be their quarterback, Mike White.
If you are a fan of a quarterback needy team, you need to take advantage of this opportunity, the fact that there aren't a ton of games on, and watch Mike White.
Yeah.
Because I just look at these quarterbacks, Jordan, and I see flaws in all of them. And not to say Mike White doesn't have flaws, he certainly does. But I still think he can be that guy, especially because he's going to Senior Bowl. He shows well there. He could be that one that ends up rising late.
Yeah.
Going back to 2016 when they had that, when Brom was his coach, had a more wide open system, number one deep accuracy percentage among all quarterbacks that year. This year, systems changed quite a bit. They seemed to spend the whole first half of the season just asking him to dump the ball off. It was kind of frustrating, but then they eventually figured it out. Still had a quarterback rating of 118.1 on deep throws on plays 20-plus yards down the field. So he was still really solid in there. And he's also number 5 in adjusted completion percentage when he had a clean pocket. Among draft prospects that had, I think it was at least 200 attempts. So, showing the accuracy and the deep ball ability, those are two pretty important things to be able to have for the next level.
That's for sure. The next teams we want to talk about here are Colorado State versus Marshall. Colorado State, and this is the Battle Frog Bowl, I guess. I don't know. I'm just kidding. I still have no idea what a Battle Frog is, Josh. So Colorado State. I
don't think you want to know. I think by the time you figure it out it's a Battle Frog, it's probably too late.
I think so. I mean, what if it's like a poisonous Battle Frog, or maybe I just get stabbed with a spear from the frog? Who knows?
I think that would be it, yeah.
I also don't know what a belk is. So there's that.
Oh, you don't know the South then?
Yeah, I don't know what a belk is.
Oh, it's just a South Macy's.
Oh, okay. So it was Colorado State wide receiver Michael Gallup playing in this Battle Frog Belk Bowl. 3.47 yards per route run, Josh. I mean, these guy's been killing it for us all year, right? I mean, hasn't he been like near the top of our grades like almost all year?
Yeah, I'll say spoiler alert. All of us that had votes for Blitnikoff, this was our guy. He ended up, I think he finished number 2. And nothing against James Washington of Oklahoma State who won it. He had an excellent year in his own right, but Michael Gallup was ridiculous. That stat you had, 3.47 yards per route run. That was number 3 in this wide receiver class. He had the top wide receiver grade in the entire country. Also forced 20 missed tackles, which is number 2 this year for all wide receiver prospects. So, I mean, he can go out and get the 50-50. He can run routes, and he can make guys miss, and he has size. I mean, he can do everything.
He is one of those prospects who's got he's got the size and is not scared to go across the middle. So, it's highly possible that on a nice slant route he comes across the middle and comes across another prospect on your list here. That's Marshall linebacker Chase Hancock.
Yeah, and he's done a little bit of everything. 16 total pressures. And again, he's gone in spurts, so it's been kind of based on how his defense has used him. He had 3 hits and 3 hurries against Western Kentucky, so that was a game where they really featured that aspect of it. So he has that ability, more so than the 16 total pressures would suggest. But the bigger point, 89.5 overall grade. That's number 5 among all linebacker prospects. So definitely at least grading out as one of the top linebackers in the country. So that's definitely a guy to watch when you're trying to watch Gallup as well in that game.
All right, the next bowl game you have highlighted here is Arkansas State versus Middle Tennessee State. The Arkansas State prospect has been a highly productive player for us for years now. Again, it seems like he may have got to college at the same time Royce Freeman did, and that's edge Ja'Von Rolland-Jones. I don't know, maybe it's just because I've seen a lot of Arkansas State games over the past couple of years. It just seems like he's been there for forever and been productive since forever.
Well, that's what happens when you get 11 sacks as a true freshman.
Okay.
And then do it again.
That'll get you
and then
playing
you do
time,
it again
right?
As a sophomore. And then as a junior, you get 17. And then this year, you get 14. I can't say I've ever heard of that.
That's really impressive.
Yeah. I don't remember. I mean, and I'm sure it's happened before, but, man, I can't remember ever hearing of a guy get 10-plus sacks every single season. I mean, this year he had 14 sacks, 6 hits, 29 hurries. He had a 4-game stretch in the middle, which is just absurd. 9 sacks, 3 hits, 19 hurries.
Wow.
I'd have trouble doing that on a video game.
I believe, don't quote me, but I believe he got an invite to the Shrine game. And so imagine, he could be one of those guys where if he has a good, week of practice at the Shrine game or in the game, could get maybe get the call up to the Senior Bowl.
Well, remember there was a certain Shrine game edge standout from his conference last year from Florida Atlantic that is now tearing it up in New Orleans.
Oh, so Mr. Hendrickson.
Mr. Trey Hendrickson. So I don't know if they're in the same conference or not, obviously, relative geographic region. But
so Arkansas State, again, you said this, hyper-productive pass rusher here in Ja'Von Rolland-Jones, and they're playing Middle Tennessee State. But, Josh, Middle Tennessee State's best prospect is hurt.
Yeah. When we looked at this guy in the offseason, that's how big a prospect wide receiver Richie James was. And there's a lot of talk going in that he could be one of the top couple of wide receivers despite his size because he has that explosive ability and plays really well out of the slot. But I think in October he broke his collarbone and he's out for the year. So we're not going to see him, unfortunately, but he's definitely a name that you will need to remember going forward for the draft process because he's a guy that a lot of people are really, really high on.
All right, moving into next week, we have some midweek bowl games here. Tuesday, there's the Florida Atlantic versus Akron. And then Florida Atlantic, we have an interior lineman prospect there, right? Center Antonyo Woods.
Yeah, look at his year statistically. He's just been awesome. 0 sacks allowed, just 5 total pressures. Wow. Number 3 center prospect in terms of overall grade with 87.3. 86.4 run blocking grade is number 2. Can you guess who number 1 is?
For centers, I would say it's maybe our boy, heavy metal band, Frank Ragnow.
Yes, straight from Norway.
Yes.
Frank Ragnow. So that tells you the kind of year he's had. That basically he's had maybe the best center year behind Frank Ragnow. So he's been outstanding. Got to take a look at him. Akron, they have a corner to keep an eye on, Jordan George. Now, I know everyone wants to dismiss him because his name's Jordan, and that name sucks.
No one wants to dismiss him.
But he's been very impressive this year. He's given up just 1 reception of 20-plus yards the entire season and only more than 10 yards after the catch in 3 of the 13 games because Akron was in the MAC championship game. Just 3 times he's given up more than 10 yards after the catch. That's ridiculous for a corner. That's really unheard of. So in those 13 games, he has 5 interceptions and 4 passes defended. Now he's just a junior, so he might be coming back. I don't know much about him in terms of personally if he's looking at going pro, but those are some huge numbers, huge production numbers that he's put up this year. So whether it's this year or next year, he's definitely a guy that you should be keeping an eye on next Tuesday.
All right. On Wednesday, we have SMU against Louisiana Tech. SMU's got a new head coach now there, I believe. So I know there's some talk about some of their underclassmen possibly leaving early. But again, a lot of talent on SMU, especially at the wide receiver position. I know that we were going to talk about Courtland Sutton, but a lot of it, we don't pay enough attention to Trey Quinn.
No, and we should, because really Sutton is the guy going in, and I still see it every day on Twitter, people saying that Sutton could be as high as number 2 in terms of wide receivers on their board. And, he's certainly in the discussion with that. He's 6'4", 215. He's forced 23 total missed tackles the last 2 seasons, 31 touchdowns the last 3, so he's been super, super productive. But Trey Quinn has really, really passed him this year and ate away at a bit of his production. Number 3 in total targets, number 1 in receptions in the country, 91.1 overall grade. That's number 2, only behind Gallup. Wow. And had 1 drop the whole year. His 1.89 drop rate, that was not surprisingly tops in the country too. That might be the single most impressive stat of his. SMU, I didn't list him in his name, but they had their third wide receiver who's a junior, so we'll see if he's staying or going based on the coach. He was actually, I think, number 2 behind James Washington in terms of catching deep balls. So there's just a really explosive group of wide receivers at SMU this year.
And then on the defensive side of the ball, though, you got a guy who's been, again, pretty productive for us for a couple of years now, and that's Justin Lawler.
Yeah, he's graded extremely well for us, and then he's a very impressive player when you watch him. 54 total pressures, number 1 pass rush productivity when rushing from the left side. Sometimes we get guys that split pretty evenly. They like to rush him for the most part from the left, and that's where he was most productive. Nobody did it better in the country than him coming off that left side.
All right, for Louisiana Tech, they have the running back Boston Scott. I know a highly elusive player, lots of jump cuts, but he can also run through some contact. But what do you like about Boston Scott?
Well, first off, his name is so much better than Jordan George. Sorry, Jordan. But, he kind of reminds me with his name. He's that guy that everyone has that one friend that's from that random place like Jackson Hole, Mississippi. And you call him Boston Scott because it's the most random thing that makes no sense. You go to the party, but the party just isn't the same unless your 2 friends, Fat Joe and Boston Scott, are there, right?
That Boston Scott's crazy, man.
Yeah, but it also makes me think of Bon Scott. But of AC/DC fame. He's been a super productive player. You mentioned all his jump cuts, and certainly elusiveness is kind of his claim to fame. 45 total missed tackles on just 180 total touches, receiving and rushing. That's number 4 among running back prospects this year. So Louisiana Tech, they just always seem to have a running back that makes guys miss. And Boston Scott is the guy this year, and he'll be fun to watch in that bowl game.
So, Josh, some of the big news in the draft world, the past couple of weeks, there have been some front office movement. We had discussed with Ryan Smith on here before about the New York Giants that they could end up making a move, and they did. And we said that they'd probably slide Kevin Abrams in for the meantime, and they ended up doing that. But they are on a search to find their GM of the future there. So they still could bring somebody in to work alongside Abrams or to take that full spot. And then we also had some movement in Cleveland. Josh, the talented, who at least in my opinion, Sashi Brown, no longer.
Is he related to the talented Billy Moy?
No, I don't think so. Okay. But Sashi's no longer there, and they brought in veteran personnel man John Dorsey, who was last the GM of the Chiefs. And so, since you and I had broken down the Chiefs draft and some of the things that Dorsey likes to do in the draft over the summer, I just thought it was sort of pertinent for us to sort of bring it back up and sort of talk about the Browns draft. At least for the Browns fans now, they have this new GM. They got to figure out, what their guy is like, what are the type of things they look for in players. So we're just going to go over a little bit of, John Dorsey, what John Dorsey likes based on the things that he's said about these players and the things that he's done. So again, Josh, when you look at what he's stepping into there, it's just an absolute wealth of draft capital. So, I understand if people are upset about, maybe something that Sashi Brown did or didn't do, but man, is he really leaving Dorsey with just, a wealth of assets.
Yeah, I think it's worth quickly going through what they have in this 2018 draft. So, first round. They obviously have their own pick, which is probably going to be the number 1 overall pick. They haven't won a game yet this year. And they have the Texans' first-round pick, which as of right now would be the number 5 pick. Just so,
That's ridiculous.
Think of everything they can accomplish there. Second round, they have 3 picks. Third round, they have 1.
That's where why that's so scary. I mean, the 2 top 5s, right? So that's that you got a good chance of getting 2 blue chippers, right? Because usually they're on 5 right. Blue chippers. But the 3 second-round picks, Josh, you know me. I've said the whole time you've known me, I would sell my soul for second-round picks. And they have friggin' 3 of them.
Yeah, there's so many different ways you can go with that. There might be 2 other prospects in the mid to late first round that say, you know what, we want those guys. They have plenty of capital to go get them. They might decide, you know what, we don't really have any guys we want. We're going to sell these picks off and get more first-round picks next year. They could do that too. So they have ultimate flexibility to do whatever they want because they have so many of those second-round picks. They also have a third-round pick. Remember, one of those second-round picks was because they took on Brock Osweiler's salary. So
that was such an innovative move.
It really was, yeah. Because they were so far under the cap, they had to spend X amount of money. So they took on Brock Osweiler's salary because they're doing him the favor for Houston. Not only did they take the player who they knew wasn't going to play for him, but they also got a second-round pick from the Texans in that respect. And obviously, again, that's a high pick as of right now. It's a very high pick.
That was I thought it was a brilliant move.
Yeah, and how about how they got their extra fourth-round pick? Because they have 2 in the fourth round. They have theirs. They have the Panthers pick in the fourth round because they traded away veteran punter Andy Lee.
That's like getting a fourth-round pick at a garage sale.
Yeah, it is.
No disrespect, Andy Lee. No disrespect.
Fifth round. They have 2 picks in the fifth round, their own pick, and pick from the Chiefs for trading Cam Irving, who wasn't part of that regime either. That was a failed pick of the previous regime. Sixth round, they have their own, and they have the Steelers pick for trading him Justin Gilbert, guy who's I don't think he's in football right now. So
yeah.
Obviously, they weren't producing anything on the field, and there were some issues back and forth with coaching and front office and all that. But in terms of draft capital, I can't remember a team being left in better situation than the Browns are.
I can't. I mean, I again having 2 top 10 picks as of right now in 3 seconds. I don't think I ever can recall that.
Yep.
You know, I mean, that's just, it's ridiculous. So, the cupboard is definitely not bare. And then a lot of their players, too, that they drafted, I think are really talented as well. I think they have a really good young core there. Again, I'm sorry it hasn't shown itself on the field yet in the win column, but I think the future is bright there. And especially with all these picks, if someone can, and again, not saying the previous regime didn't hit, but I mean, if you can hit on a good number of these picks, this team could get good in a hurry, Josh.
Yeah. Yeah. Could you imagine and this is, I'm just talking strictly on top guys in the draft and kind of knowing where they're going to fall, not so much looking at their current roster. Obviously, they drafted Myles Garrett this past year. We talked about him in a segment in terms of rookie of the year. He's right up there, even though he had to miss a couple games to start with. He looks like he's going to be a bona fide superstar for them. Can you imagine if they got the quarterback with their first pick, and got a Bradley Chubb, then decided to trade back in and get, a couple of those other defensive tackles. Yeah. I mean, because they'd have enough to go in and get Maurice Hurst and possibly even Vita Vea or something like that. Could you imagine if they just loaded a position group like defensive line and got their quarterback? I mean, they could do it. Yeah. It's just a hypothetical situation, but that's the kind of capital they have. That's franchise changing is the expectation of what this draft should be.
It's incredible. It's science fictional. Like I said, they could draft an entire offensive line.
Yeah. There's so many different ways to do it. They could completely gut the secondary, There's so many different directions they could do it. Anyways.
So going back to, Dorsey himself and how he's going to want to structure things and how he's going to want to structure that war room there, Josh. We know that from the past he's going to like to have a big board of around 150 to 170 players.
Yep.
We've seen teams with much smaller and we've seen teams with bigger. I think that's a pretty Goldilocks range there, that 150 range. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I think so. That's kind of right in the middle there. Personally, for my taste, it's probably a little bit big, but I think
you want that Patriots board. That's 75 to 100.
Yeah, I like 75 to 100. I like 75 to 100 because then you end up getting in scenarios where there's guys that you don't really like, but they fall, and you think, well, I don't really like him, but he's got value at this point. No, get the guys you like.
All right. So again, they have the number 1 overall pick, and so they'll be able to take any quarterback that they want that declares for the draft or that's a senior. So even if they took him at 1 or if they waited a little bit longer and took him at 6, like Josh, like what is something about Dorsey and how he what he likes about quarterbacks that we could like share with the Browns fans?
Yeah, something they talked about with Mahomes last year in terms of they kind of went around the room, asked everybody about specific traits, and Mahomes they thought far and away was the best in terms of retention and learning of the game, which may come as a surprise to some knowing from the system Mahomes came from, but that's how they felt on him. And also considering the fact that, we're retaining this coaching staff, they're certainly going to be under fire next year. As much as they can, they're going to want to win now. They're going to want a quarterback that can come in and produce right away, or at least be able to adapt to an NFL system very quickly. That's what leads me to believe that should be a feather in the cap of Josh Rosen in terms of getting to that number one overall pick.
Yeah, I mean that poor guy has played in 3 different offenses in 3 years, including his second offense was that one run by Kennedy Palomalu, which was heavy under center, heavy turning your back and play action. So he's done a lot of different things, Josh, and I have to think he's got a pretty high football IQ. I said just from being on those different schemes. Yeah,
he has to be able to run each of them, and as you said, having the experience in the pro style scheme, that understanding the footwork and all the little nuances of that, that's going to put him so far ahead of the curve. That's why guys like Jared Goff, it took a while for them to even get on the field. Saw the same this year with Trubisky. And even now, obviously he's handcuffed in terms of what he's being allowed to do on the football field. Rosen's a guy that you can give him the playbook and kind of just let him go right away.
Yeah, so he would definitely fit that bill then for the type of prospect that I think Dorsey would like at quarterback, and they'll be in position to take him. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's moving on. Like probably the best player, because we haven't seen Patrick Mahomes yet. I mean, I love Patrick Mahomes, but he hasn't really made it to the field yet for the Chiefs. But their best player so far for this draft class has been their running back Kareem Hunt, and Dorsey likes specific types of things in his running backs, and that's really shown itself with the Kareem Hunt pick. But so Josh, what is he really going to look for as far as his type of back?
Yeah, the phrase contact balance is the most interesting one. That's not one we hear a lot, but he seemed to repeat that over and over when he talked about Kareem Hunt in particular. Mm-hmm. So that's something you want to look for. And then you think about current personnel, they have to be happy with what they're getting from Duke Johnson, who's really a receiving back. So, they want a guy with some balance after contact, that can run through contact, pick up extra yards with power, can break tackles. To me, that puts a guy like San Diego State's Rashaad Penny into the mix. That's a guy that I think would be a really good fit for them. And again, they're in the situation to where, you don't have to play the lottery with a position like running back. If he's a guy you really like, you just say, we'll take him with our top pick in the second round. And we don't have to worry about someone else potentially poaching him. And we can go get other guys at different spots there. If a guy like Rashaad Penny is straightforward, our guy.
Right, and there's I think there's going to be some other backs too.
Sure,
like Boston Scott, like we mentioned, he's got some good contact balance, but he's small. Yep. He's not as big as Penny. And then Penny's got that speed too, man. Like he can, he runs through one of those hits and keeps his balance, and then he can take it all the way the distance. So
yeah, I really like his fit there, and I kind of think that when you try and put a value on guys and where they can go, I think ultimately teams that want Penny have to be thinking of the Browns in terms of they're going to be looking for that guy. A back like Penny can come in and help them hopefully win games right away, because that position transitions much quicker than other positions. And certainly, again, this coaching staff is going to want to win games to try and retain their jobs next year. So it's going to be important that they're able to function as an offense and getting the quarterback that's able to play right away, like we talked about, and B, a running back that can come in and be productive, running between the tackles immediately. That would be a very important step for them.
And I know going back to the Jehu Chesson pick from last year that Dorsey also likes some height on his wide receivers. So
sure.
Some tall wide receivers could also be in play. But let's go to the defensive side of the ball, Josh. From the things that they, for the players that they took last year and the identifying factors in some of these players, what's really stood out for you for what you think that Dorsey's going to look for along the defensive line?
Yeah, so last year they took Tano Passignon, who we saw at Senior Bowl. Fun name to pronounce, but a couple of things I liked about him, and I think it's kind of telling, especially because that is probably a position they could look to upgrade this year. They like the idea of kicking him down to the 3 technique in pass rush situations in terms of playing the edge on first and second down, playing inside. So you think about guys that have the size to be able to do that. Also, he talked about him as being, well, he said 1AA All-American, but reality is it's just FCS now. 1AA is a thing of the past, but we understand his point, and he made a point to say, I fight for those guys. He was 1AA All-American himself. Mm-hmm. So when you put those together, when you put his emphasis on Senior Bowl, which, again, Cleveland could not just be a thing where he's there hands-on himself wanting to watch and be there, but they could be coaching again, because my guess is they're going to get that option. So I looked to the Senior Bowl, and there are already a lot of small school prospects committed at interesting positions that they could look to upgrade. Like, there's a whole bunch of corners from small schools, like Penny Johnson from Southern, Taron Johnson from Weber State, Michael Joseph from Dubuque, Saran Neal from Jacksonville State. All those corners you got. North Dakota State, they always have good prospects. Nick DeLuca, inside linebacker, that's another position they could look to upgrade. South Carolina State has an inside linebacker, Darius Leonard. So there's a lot of guys at a variety of different positions from these small schools. They're going to get to see a firsthand look at Senior Bowl. And so when you put his interest in both those two together, that's a group of players that, if I'm a Browns fan, I'm definitely paying attention to, because Dorsey is.
Yeah, and he's, that's a really good point that you bring up. And he's, we from personal experience just witnessing him that he is sort of one of the more active scouting GMs compared to some of the other GMs.
Oh, there's no question about that. And that comes from his time in Green Bay, because that's there's no one more active in terms of scouting all-star games
than Uncle Ted.
than Uncle Ted in Green Bay. So yeah. So you might have to get a couple coffees this year, Jordan. One for Uncle Ted again, and one for John Dorsey.
So as Josh, brings it up, guys, if you're a Browns fans, definitely keep an eye on the players at the Senior Bowl, because you're probably going to end up with some of them in the draft. And John Dorsey's definitely going to be keeping a close eye on those guys at the Senior Bowl. So on Monday, Josh, that Reese's Senior Bowl announced some more player invite acceptances. It's really exciting. This is a great crop of players, Josh. So we just wanted to go over some of these guys and, give our listeners some of the signature stats of reasons why, we think these are some of the top seniors in the country and why they belong there in Mobile. So we want to start out, Josh, just announced, actually, I don't even think it was on Monday. I think it was even more recent, but Mason Rudolph, the quarterback for Oklahoma State, is going to be there. Josh, it's very exciting. He's graded well for us for years now. Definitely one of the top senior quarterbacks, but he's really stood out as far as, in our system, really on the deep pass.
Yeah, that's certainly been a hallmark of theirs, and we'll get into his top receiving weapon is certainly part of that. But he's had a adjusted completion percentage when you account for drops and other things like that of 53.1. That's third best in the entire country this year, not just among draft prospect quarterbacks. So really outstanding in that capacity. 1,562 yards on deep passes. That's also number one in the country. So it's one of those things. That's something I'm really intrigued to see in Mobile from him, because when you watch him, those deep balls, they kind of teach him in Oklahoma State to just kind of throw the ball up in the air, just get a ton of air under the ball and let the wide receiver run under it. And that's not fully going to translate to the next level, and certainly not in Mobile with that wind that's always coming off the Gulf. That tends to wreak havoc with quarterbacks at Senior Bowl. So I want to see how he adjusts with that. And that'll be something interesting to watch.
Well, the good news for Mr. Rudolph is he's bringing his binky, his security blanket, his favorite deep target, as you mentioned, and that is James Washington, one of the premier wide receivers, the Biletnikoff Award winner. And it's awesome that they're probably going to be able to put on quite a bit of a show in the times that he gets to actually throw to Washington in the practices. But again, so
he's going to have Aitman too.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Because Aitman we talked about last week is an invite.
Mason Rudolph show. So what I know Washington stood out on those deep passes, hasn't he?
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's going to be a scenario where they're going to try and split that threesome up a little bit, just because you want to get them with guys that they aren't familiar with. But anyways, James Washington on the deep balls, 7 touchdowns on deep passes. That's tied at number 1 among senior wide receivers. 3.47 yards per route run. Also, that ranks number 3 among senior wide receivers. So, I mean, we knew coming in, he's your vertical threat, and he's certainly shown it yet again this year.
All right, moving on to one of the next exciting players, and it's Jaylen Samuels from North Carolina State. Josh, they have him listed as a running back. We sort of view him as a tight end, but it's someone that we spoke about during the summer that we said is you could use in a Ty Montgomery role, where he could carry the ball, or he could go out and be a wide receiver or a slot. I know he's got a lot of his work done in the slot, Josh. He's been one of the more effective, slot receiving players, regardless of what position you want to call him. He's been one of the more effective slot receivers in the country.
Yeah, this is one of the more exciting things to me about Senior Bowl is you always tend to have guys like this that you're not really sure what to do, and they do a great job of not just pigeonholing them into one position. They put them all over. So my guess is we're probably not going to see reps at true inline tight end. He just doesn't have that size because he's under 6 foot, under 230. But we're definitely going to see him in the slot. We're definitely going to see him at running back. We'll probably see him a little bit at H-back. We're going to see him in blocking drills in that regard as well. But, yeah, he's outstanding this year. 77.8 catch rate in the slot. That's number 2 among senior wide receivers. Caught 42 balls in the slot. That's number 2 among senior tight ends. So there you go. In terms of his production, that's certainly at a very high level. Such
an intriguing player, to be that effective in the slot, but who could still carry the ball out of the backfield. Yeah, it's interesting and dangerous mix. All right, the next player we'll discuss, Josh, is a more traditional tight end. That's Troy Fumagali from Wisconsin. A big framed kid. He's a lot bigger than Samuels. Like you said, he's someone who could probably line up in line a little bit more, but still very productive in the pass game.
Yeah, he only had 2 drops on 58 targets this past season. I think he only had 2 the prior year as well. So outstanding hands, very consistent player in that regard. 2.14 yards per route run for him. That ranks number 3 among senior tight ends. So that tells you a little bit about his efficiency. And again, he's graded out pretty well in terms of a blocker, and he's got that kind of frame as well. So having that positional versatility, that's certainly going to help him down in Mobile and in terms of how the NFL views him.
Moving down this list, and my goodness, some of the interior offensive linemen that are going to be in this game. So they added Will Hernandez, the guard from UTEP, PFF favorite, just a people mover in the run game and highly effective pass blocker. Josh, I'm really excited to see Will there.
0 sacks, 0 hits.
How many?
3 total hurries on 385 pass blocking snaps. So his pass blocking efficiency rate is number 3 among senior guards, and quite frankly, that's great that there's 2 guys above him. But I mean, that doesn't knock him down the board behind guys just because of that. It just means that he's. I mean, that's such an elite stat that he's put up. It's ridiculous, and this is a fantastic interior line class, and we're not done with big commits that we've heard from this week on the interior.
No, because moving just one spot over, actually he can play center or guard, but mostly center is Frank Ragnow from Arkansas, another PFF favorite, and I believe he's been pretty effective as a pass blocker as well.
Yeah, in terms of center, 0 sacks, 0 hits, 1 hurry on 189 pass block snaps. Of course, he was hurt, but he'll be ready to go, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch him there. Number 2 ranked senior in terms of pass blocking efficiency, number 1 overall graded center in the entire country, number 1 also in terms of run blocking grade as well. So he's basically the top guy in just about every single category you can have as an offensive lineman.
So let's shift to the other side of the ball and focus on a guy who's going to be going up against Hernandez and Ragnow, and that is Florida State defensive tackle Derrick Nnadi. So again, hopefully we'll see them do some one-on-one pass rush stuff, but I imagine you're going to see them try to, it's going to be a lot of just the heads up in the team portion, maybe in the run game.
Yeah, Nnadi that's really his specialty is defending the run. 26 run stops. That ranks number 9 among senior defensive tackles. His run stop percentage was actually 5th among senior defensive tackles. So really strong against the run. This is a big opportunity for him because the NFL is not a running league anymore, and run-only defensive linemen, we've seen the last couple of years, those guys fall in the draft, Jordan. So he needs to be able to prove in this venue that he can get after the passer. And I can't think of a better situation for him than getting one-on-ones with Frank Ragnow, as he's probably going to get in practice, because my guess would be they're both going to be on the South roster. So huge opportunity for him. And if he can take advantage of that, that's really going to help him. Because a lot of people, draft media-wise, are still looking at him as a first-round pick. I don't see it based off what he's done the last 2 years and his inability to consistently rush the passer. I think the NFL values that too much from the interior line, as they should. So he has to perform here in that capacity in Mobile.
All right, and that's going to do it for the show. We've kept you up to date on everything that's going on in the draft world and in the PFF world. We broke down the Rookies of the Year list for you. We talked about the best prospects for the Bowls coming up this weekend. We talked about some of John Dorsey's preferences in players and how he likes to operate his front office for you Cleveland Browns fans. And then we also discussed some signature stats for these top Senior Bowl guys who are going to be headed down there to Mobile. So, again, great show, Josh. Thank you. Anything you want to say on the way out, bud?
No, you've done quite enough already. I'm about tired of this.
He always loves my voice. Well, see you guys next week. Bye-bye.